8 out of 10 for performance and deserving of bonuses. That's Southern Response's report card, according to its board chair. And that's despite the state quake insurer being tied up in ongoing and expensive legal action. Southern Response is appealing a High Court decision that found it misled and deceived claimants Karl and Alison Dodds when it kept secret from them a higher detailed repair assessment to rebuild their quake-damaged home. Now, that meant the couple unwittingly settled for hundreds of thousands of dollars less, and the court ordered the insurer to pay up. Southern Response says the appeal is about getting clarity around questions raised by the judgement, but a court document shows it's asking for the decision to be overturned and wants the Dodds to pay its court costs. I asked Southern Response Chair Alister James if he thinks the decision to appeal is fair.
I was present yesterday with the ministers and Anthony Honeybone when we met with them and their lawyers, Peter Woods and Tim Grimwood. So I understand it's a very stressful situation. Not only the court proceedings, which are always demanding on people, but of course, having gone through the Christchurch earthquakes and lost their beautiful home.
Is it the fair thing to do, though? Because does that matter?
Well, I think the decision has implications beyond Karl and Alison Dodds, and I guess to try and alleviate the distress for them is that we have indicated that we would willingly pay their past legal costs in terms of the proceedings and in terms of the costs of the legal fees for the Court of Appeal proceedings as well. The notice of appeal has now been filed, but their decision certainly has implications for how we deal with other like cases, and we need to get better clarification than what we have.
And you're seeking costs on appeal?
Well, that would be a standard appeal that is filed, but I guess that is a matter for consideration during the course of the proceedings or following the outcome of the proceedings.
But you're seeking costs in relation to the High Court and the appeal. Why would you do that?
Look, I said that's what's been the relief that's been sought in the notice of appeal. I think that's just a standard form of appeal, but as I said, we have indicated that we are willing to pay the legal costs of Mr and Mrs Dodds in terms of the proceedings so far in the Court of Appeal proceedings.
How much do you estimate that to be, the cost to the Dodds so far, that bill?
Well, that would be significant. I don't know the actual amount because my expectation is that this is a matter that will be agreed between the solicitors for Southern Response and the solicitors for Mr and Mrs Dodds. So I don't know the stage of course what the future costs are. I guess that's for...
No, to date. What about the costs to date? You must have a general idea.
Sorry?
You must have a general idea.
Well, I don't have a general idea because I haven't seen those figures. So I don't know what the lawyers for Mr and Mrs Dodds have sought or are seeking. But,
so what have the costs been to Southern Response so far to take this legal action in the Dodds case?
Well, I don't know the actual amount of those costs either, but I said that it will be significant.
Southern Response, under their values, they say that they will treat their stakeholders with care, consideration and fairness, that you will demonstrate honesty, transparency and fairness, and we will hold ourselves accountable for our actions. We aim for excellence in everything we do. How well has Southern Response done in living up to those values?
Well, I think that, look, I said that there have been mistakes made. This has been a very difficult environment since 2011. But I believe that far the majority of Southern Response customers who have settled their claims will have been satisfied.
You had people on hunger strikes.
Yes, and look, and unfortunately, that is they are events that have occurred way before my time, and so I'm not so familiar with the circumstances. Although I lived in Christchurch at the time, and I was aware of those things happening.
Yeah. So what have you done though to put it right and to change the culture within Southern Response?
Well, look, I don't support cases having to go to litigation, and so
Then why are they going to litigation?
We have encouraged staff to settle claims fairly and in accordance with policies. Of course, we now have the advantage of the Christchurch claims resettlement service.
And I understand that, but you've just said, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is important. You have just said that you don't support cases going to litigation. So did you support the Doddses being taken back to court or not?
You? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And so Southern.
So are you uncomfortable with it then?
Appeal, but the appeal itself was a decision made by the Crown. And we had input into that decision, of course. And so you had Crown law taking a separate lens from ourselves as to whether this was a decision that should be appealed. And that was the recommendation, no doubt, to the Attorney-General.
Are you uncomfortable in any way about this going back to court, the Dodds' case?
Not this case, no. But I'm uncomfortable in a general sense of any cases having to end up in the higher courts.
Do you feel that there are customers of Southern Response who have been wronged?
Look, I guess, as I said, mistakes will have happened, and there are no doubt some cases where people perhaps haven't had their fair entitlement, and of course there are still cases where people are in dispute with Southern Response, where we're seeking to settle those claims, often through GCCRS or through other forms of mediation.
So are those people that were tricked into taking lower office because they were operating a 2-quote or a 2DRA system?
Well, again, we don't have any figures that we can accurately say it's this number or that number. But in terms of a 2-quote system, it wasn't a 2-quote system. It was a detailed repair and rebuild analysis that I think could probably best be referred to as a scope of works, where certain figures were not disclosed to some customers.
Regardless of what we call it, the outcome was the same. They were given lower figures and feel that they were tricked into settling for lower sums of money.
Where they were not taking a rebuild option, but were taking the option to purchase another property somewhere else.
Now, despite the fact that you say that you would prefer that cases don't end in litigation, you don't support that. I think about $10 million has been spent on your watch on litigation. So yes. Are too many cases still ending up in court?
Well, I think so, but look, these are cases where we are the defendant or respondent, not the applicant, and so where people prefer to go down the option of filing proceedings in the High Court, we have no other option. But
they're going to High Court because they don't think they're getting a fair deal, aren't they? So we're in a circle right, here, aren't we?
But there are other forms of resolving disputes, and it's those other forms of resolving disputes that we are encouraging.
And in the case of the Dodds, you are the ones who are taking it back to court.
Indeed.
In terms of expense, what information do you have about your liability relating to the Dodds case and other similar cases?
Well, I'm not going to discuss that because it's open
Why
speculation.
Not?
Well, I think it is inappropriate with the Court of Appeal proceedings.
Well, taxpayers might believe it's appropriate because it's their money that's being spent and potentially the bill that they will have to foot. So, again, what have you been told about what your financial liability could look like?
Well, look, there have been different figures bandied about, and I think it's
So talk us through them. What figures have you got? What figures have you got?
Well, the figures are really very speculative and back pocket figures.
What are they?
And I'm not going to disclose those because I think more detailed work
is that because those figures are scary?
Possibly on a case-by-case. Well, not as scary as I think the billions that you referred to on your program yesterday with Minister Robertson.
So do you think it will be less than $1 billion?
Oh, significantly so.
Okay, how much less than $1 billion? Hundreds of millions?
Well, it could be on the outside. That would be an outside figure. So
how many hundreds of millions? Give me a range.
No, I'm not prepared to give you a range. But one of the difficulties
you're talking a big chunk of money here, and it is taxpayer money. So
well, let's agree it's a big chunk of money. But look, one of the dangers of speculating about these amounts is that when Southern Response was established by the government to take over from the failed AMI insurance at that stage, there were figures mentioned of $600-700 million as being the end cost to the Crown. We are now up to almost 1.5 million as it is, billion. So this has been...
Sorry, can you say that again?
1.5 billion has been the cost. It is almost the cost so far to the taxpayer. So this is the largest taxpayer bailout, I suspect, ever in New Zealand.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely stellar, outstanding performance, and 1 being abysmal, how would you rate the performance of Southern Response in looking after its clients and customers?
Look, I would rate it 8.
Seriously?
Yes, seriously. I have confidence in the Chief Executive and the staff, and I want to say that, staff come to Southern Response every day wanting to settle claims. There's no staff bonuses for settling for less, and there's certainly no policy that people should settle for less than what a customer is entitled to.
What are their staff bonuses for?
Well, there's no staff bonuses for settling for less or achieving some financial target. There's none of those sort of bonuses.
Right. So what are their bonuses for then?
Well, their bonuses would be for their overall performance, including the number of claims that are settled in a timely fashion.
How many bonuses have you paid in recent years? And what's the value of those bonuses?
Well, I'm not in a position to tell you that, and that's a matter between the employer and the employee.
So I'm not asking you to identify people. Just give me an overall figure. So in the last 12 months, in the last financial year, how much did you pay in bonuses to Southern Response staff members?
Well, it's not significant, and I don't have those figures at hand.
So what's not significant?
Well, I'm not in a position to disclose any figures to you because I don't have those figures with me. Okay,
so tell me a bit about the key performance indicators then that you're measuring them against in order to determine whether they deserve bonuses. Talk me through it.
Well, I guess that the things that would be reflected in an employee's performance is really the number of claims that they have been involved in, that they've been able to achieve fair and timely settlements. That's probably the most significant performance indicator.
And so how do you determine what's fair in terms of those performance indicators?
Well, where houses have been successfully repaired, where properties that have been, or where customers have elected to have a rebuild, where there's been a successful rebuild that's been completed, and otherwise in terms of those customers who have sought cash settlements and where they've been achieved on a fair and reasonable basis.
And what about customer feedback? Is that taken into account, whether the customer thinks they've been fairly treated, well treated? Are you taking that into account before you pay a bonus?
Well, Yes, look.
And how do you register that then?
Get feedback. We do get feedback in terms of customer feedback, and I have to say that in the early days of Southern Response, the level of feedback was actually very positive. I accept that we've got to a stage now where the remaining claims are particularly complex and difficult, and I guess that the level of customer satisfaction will be less.
Can we please get a figure from you for the number of bonuses you've paid in the last financial year?
Sure. We'll look into that.
That was the chair of Southern Response, Alister James. Now, Southern Response has just provided us with those figures that we asked for. It says the total amount paid in staff bonuses for the past financial year is $1.13 million, and that 130 staff were eligible for bonuses. Southern Response also says the value of those bonuses represents about 6.5% of the total claims handling expense for the year. It says performance payments are based on targets that include both quantitative targets and soft skills, such as effective communication, outstanding customer service, and undertaking tasks beyond job expectations. But that does not relate in any way to the amount that a customer is paid.